There's a lazy mountain over there. Pioneer Peak there through the trees. Sunrise. And a few minutes after 10. A little chilly out. Wanted to show you the Alaskan sunrise out here. Just enjoying the beauty. We'll catch you guys here shortly. Hey, greetings, good morning. Thanks for joining me. It's Fred in Alaska. I'm getting ready to start this telephonic interview with John. I'll turn it over to you, and you can fill in everybody on what you've experienced up here yourself.
Okay, thanks, Fred. John and I, or Fred and I have been talking, and I've had a few incidences over the course of my life in the outdoors in Alaska. And back in the early 70s, at the headwaters of one of the rivers flowing into the Yukon, not far from the Yukon Bridge, we experienced wood knocks and odd vocals. And at the time, we had no idea what was going on. We just weren't sure what we were hearing. We just attributed to what we knew, and that was moose. And it was just very odd. And the first year that we'd heard this stuff, like I said, we were moose hunting in there, and we didn't see anything. And the following year, we were back in there again, and that year we didn't hear any vocals or anything. But my brother and I, we were pretty young. We're with my dad, and we woke up, and my brother asked me who was at the fire last night, and I said, well, I guess it was Dad. And he said, no, Dad was asleep, and you were sleeping. And I said, well, I don't know who it was. There would be no people out there. I mean, we were very remote. And so my dad got up, and my brother asked him about it. He foo-fooed it, as a kid's imagination or whatever. Certainly wasn't thinking anything along the lines of Hairy Man. So, and I only mention this stuff is because later it all kind of fits in, after you go through a lifetime of experiences, and then
right,
you learn more, and puzzle pieces start popping in the board. And then I really didn't have anything go on that I could really attribute to that until the late 70s. I was down at Lake Clark, and I was working at a lodge there at the lake, and when there wasn't anybody around, I'd go on hikes. I'd hike the beach or hike over to a river that was close by and do some fishing. Or sometimes I'd cut up to the airstrip, and there's an old cat trail that went straight away from the lodge back towards Telequana Lake and Twin Lakes. And one day I'm hiking this trail away from the airstrip, and there was some very odd calls coming from ahead of me, probably a quarter mile away. And I didn't have a firearm with me, and I know it made me feel uncomfortable. I couldn't for the life of me figure out what was making this noise, these vocals. And so I stopped and listened to it, and it went on and on. This is like, probably 4 p.m, and I didn't see anything, but it made me feel uncomfortable, and I was getting a ways out from the airstrip, and I thought, I don't know what this is, but it doesn't sound right. So I just turned around and went back. And another notable thing, the only vocals that I heard was that one time there. But one of the cooks, I stayed in the main building there. I had a room that backed up to the woods, and one of the cooks was also staying in the main building, and her room was on the same side, the same wall that mine was on, and she had a window in her room. And I can't even tell you how many times she would get up in the morning and tell me to run that bear off that taps on the window at night, And I would laugh about it. The bears don't tap on windows. And she was adamant that, just about every night this bear would come to her window and just tap on the window. And of course it's dark and the generator's off, so she's just got a little flashlight. She never claimed to see anything, and I never put two and two together. But like I said, later this all kind of fits in, And then back in, I guess it would be about 1987, I was over in Dillingham, in Fred's stomping grounds. And we're going up the McClung River, which is a tributary off the Wood River on your way to Aleknagek. And I was up there just past the tidal influence where all the mud stops and it turns to gravel. And I saw an older native couple, Yupik, pulled over to the bank. And they were both waving their hands at me. So they thought they were broke down. Of course, you pull in to see if you can help or whatever's going on. And I pulled in with my skiff, and as soon as I turned off the motor and got on the beach there, the woman and the man were both pointing, towards the woods and pointing towards the river, that a hairy man had just jumped across the river. And I said, what? And they were just full of emotion and very adamant about what had just gone down. And I walked with the gentleman over to the water, and he showed me where it landed. It landed actually in the water, and then it ran up across the gravel and into the woods. But we followed you could see the wet marks on the gravel. You couldn't make out any tracks or anything. It was the soil was firm enough that you just, the rocks and all, you couldn't make tracks out. But you could see it was wet or something had run across there. And I believed them, I believed them 100% that they saw. I mean, it didn't make sense that a moose would jump that, and a brown bear certainly wouldn't. I just couldn't imagine what else it would have been. But we went up to McClung that day, and we fished, and we had no further encounters and no problems. And I always logged that in the back of my head, and I always thought about that when I went to the Gula Walk or the Gula Puck fishing. I always thought about that couple I ran into on the McClung, but never really saw anything. Didn't hear anything up there either. And then about 2015, I happened to be hunting down in Monaghan Flats off the Denali Highway from the Cantwell end. Was down in the flats, 5-6 miles from the road. And I was on a little knoll down there, just glassing. And I had a fellow with me, and he had shot a caribou. And we had processed this caribou, and it was all quartered, laying on a tarp there, all ready to go. And we were getting ready to haul it out, but just before we left, we decided to do some more looking around. So I'm glassing down slope all the way out to the bottom of the flats from where we're at. And I see this dark form on this just small little mound out there in the flats next to a spruce tree. And I mentioned and it looked like a Sasquatch. I mean, it was from the back. It was the backside of it. But I mentioned to the fellow I was with, I said, well, have you ever seen a Sasquatch? And he said, no. I said, well, I think there's one standing out there. And I told him where it was, and he looked through his binoculars, and he didn't say much. He just kind of, I don't know what that is. And I had a really good pair of binoculars. It was ice. I could see it very well. And he quit looking at it. I think he wrote it off as a stump or something. And I didn't say any more about it, but I kept checking this thing and watching it. And I swear I could see hair, And I was about 98% convinced that that's what I was looking at. I could see the arms and the back and the legs. I mean, everything was there. And I looked away and looked back, and it had walked off that mound. It was gone. And I mentioned to him, I said, well, that Sasquatch just walked off. And he looked over and he said, are you sure you're looking at the right spot? I said, yeah, there's no doubt. There's the tree right there it was standing next to. It's right there, plain as day. So that was a long range sighting. That was probably, at least 600 yards down there where it was. Its back was to us, and it never knew we were there.
Right. And that area you're talking about, that area has a whole bunch of, just on my channel alone, there's a whole bunch of people from up and down that Denali Highway there that have shared their experiences. And I mean, it fits right into place. Monaghan Flats isn't all that far from the McLaren River or, Swede Lakes. I mean, as the crow flies, it's not that far from like Triangle Lake area. You know what I mean? It's just right down the road. Right. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. I just
No problem. No problem. Yeah, and I really appreciate the fact that you're doing that map program too, because I think this stuff goes on so much and nobody talks about it. And now maybe some folks will start coming forward, and
Yeah.
we can get that map populated pretty well.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I went on with life until it was 2017 that everything really changed for me. I got contacted by an engineer in Fairbanks to take some other engineers from out of the country. I think they said they were from New Zealand, and they wanted to go into some old mine and look at some old mining equipment that they had there. It was, it's just relic stuff, but it's still at the location. And I had the equipment to take them in there. I had a machine that would haul these guys in. So I said, he asked if I would do it. And I said, absolutely, yeah, we'll do that. So the day came, and in we go, and we get into this mine. Well, they all get out of the machine and go to look at this equipment, which, I had seen many times before, and I really, really didn't see any reason to walk over there with them. Well, I just sat in the machine. I think I had some coffee, and I'm sitting there and just happened to glance to my right, down on the ground just outside the machine, and I saw a set of tracks, and I instantly knew they were Sasquatch tracks. And later that day, I came back to the location and measure them, but I didn't say anything to these guys. I didn't want to, just start a bunch of commotion. So they came back and they loaded up, and I hauled them back into town. It wasn't real far, but it was muddy and swampy, but it wasn't a great distance. And I got them hauled back out, and I ran home and got my camera and came back and went in by myself. And I wanted to photograph these tracks and, get some measurements and see what was going on there. But the tracks were 17.25 inches. And the one place I could get a stride measurement on it, heel to heel, I believe was 58 inches.
Wow.
And so it's in mud. So I get to snooping around, and they look like these tracks. Looked like to me they're at least 10 days old. I mean, there's some time on them. But I move up the trail a little bit, and here I find another set that's just made, literally. I mean, they're really, really fresh tracks, and they're new. But it's the same individual, or one with the same exact size foot. And I get to thinking, I thought, I think, what would happen if I brought some stuff up here and I put it down in the woods, just some, trinket type stuff, and just see what would happen, if they would take it, or if I could, get them to come around, I could find some more tracks. And my head's just spinning, that, once you come to the realization that these things are real, I just can't stand not knowing, I gotta know.
Yeah.
And so I get a few things from home, and I think it started out with like the molar from a moose and a coil of red paracord, and I know, I looked at some pictures last night. It was a vertebrae from a moose that I had boiled up in a shop. And so I take these 3 items up there, and I find a birch log that's down. It's kind of in an obvious spot. And I put these 3 items on the log, and I waited a couple days and went back, and everything was gone, which, doesn't really mean a lot. It could be anything.
Right.
But I find the rope up in a tree, about 10 or 11 feet up in a tree, where a branch had been snapped off, and it was hung over that broken branch in a coil.
Mm.
And I thought, that made my head kind of like, what's going on here? So I thought, well, I'm going to continue with this, and the forest is leaf litter. It's high bush cranberries, and where this log is, and rose hips, and it's not really conducive to find that track. It's pretty hard substrate in places, and other places so much leaf litter from birch you just can't really tell. But after a few weeks of bringing things up there, just no food, just items, and things were disappearing at a pretty rapid rate, I started seeing some depressions in the leaf litter that matched that track that I had seen earlier. And some of the items were taken, but when they started showing back up, 4 or 6 or 8 days later, an item they took 10 days ago would show right back up there, right on the log. I thought I might be onto something. So I decided that I was going to go up there. This was probably in, I don't know, this probably happened in late July. So I had August and part of September that I could mess around with this. And it wasn't too far from where I was living. I could go up there every other day. And I thought I'm going to go at 7 at night, or 7:30, and try to let them pattern me. And if I do it enough, eventually they'll figure out, you know, he comes every other day and he comes at this. I mean, I would think they would figure it out.
Right.
So I start taking stuff up there, and over the course of the rest of that summer, you know, like I said, things disappeared, things came back. One thing they took was a little kid's mirror, like you'd buy at a dime store for a little girl. It's just reflective aluminum foil. It's not even a mirror,
right?
But you can see yourself. They took I can't remember how many of those they took, but it was at least a couple of those things they took, and I never did see those again. And I took a cow caribou antler up there, and you know, there's not a lot of caribou around Fairbanks close anyway. And I thought, well, I'll just leave it and see what happens. Well, from the day I took that cow caribou antler up there to the day I quit going there, every time I went, they would move it to another location about 20 feet away and set it over there. And they put it in the same spot every single time. Why, I have no idea. I can't make heads or tails of that.
Right.
And during the course of that first summer, I started noticing some other things going in there that, you know, trees are snapped off, trees are stacked, you know, just real odd, definitely not normal stuff in the forest. You know, the trees pulled out of the ground and the root end is up, and, you know, they're leaning against something else. But I didn't see anything. I never saw anything. And I thought at times that I did hear them. That first year, I was pretty sure that I'd heard a few vocals. And I remember it was 4 days before it snowed. I was kind of keeping track of things, and I'd stuck to my schedule pretty well. That was the last time that I saw, or that I knew that they were there for sure. And they had stacked some poles up along this route that I walk in, like a teepee configuration. And that was 4 days before it snowed, and that was the last time that they visited that area that I know of until the following spring. And I think it snowed that year. It was like mid-October. And so they just vacated the place completely. They were just gone. I don't know where they went or exactly how they went. They were just gone. And the following spring, I went up there. I think it was about the 25th of May that I had seen some changes in the woods. And what had happened, Fred, was there were two big cottonwood trees that were logs. I'm sorry, they weren't cottonwood, they were birch. And they were stuff that had fallen down, but they weren't rotten yet. You could still move them around. And these two trees got stuffed, wedged between two other birch, and they were just like cantilevering in this, where these two birch trees split and grew out of the ground, which were good sized birch. These other big trees got stuffed in there, and these logs were, 600-800 pounds.
Right.
And that happened about the 25th of May, so I knew that they were back. And I didn't know why they stuffed those logs in there, but they were back. So I just carried on with what I was doing, just trinkets, bringing them up to the log, every other day or so, 7 to 7:30. And I just, long story short, there was one day that it was probably all the way up towards the end of July that I was scheduled to go up there that day, and I couldn't go because we had something going on that night. I had to go out to dinner or something, and I told my wife, I said, well, I'm going to go up there now. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I go up there, and I get in there, and I get to the log, and all this, I can't remember what was moved that day, but for some reason something was moved because I was kneeling down, and one knee on the ground, just kneeling down, and started to do whatever I was going to do, put stuff back on the log. And I caught movement out of my left eye, just off to my left. There's a heavy clump of diamond willow there, just real thick. And this I see this black shape come around this diamond well, and I rolled my head to the left to look at it, and it's a Sasquatch. It's about 5'8", maybe 140 pounds, and there's not a lot separating us when he came around that brush. And as soon as he saw me, he stopped, and I stopped, and all we did was look at each other. I looked, right in his face for any sign of aggression. That's what I was watching for. So I did have a pistol,
right,
and just inside my coat, and I did not see any aggression whatsoever. It was just simply a stoic stare, just watching me. And this went on for maybe 4 or 5 seconds, is all, not very long at all. And I rose up to standing height, and when I did, he apparently didn't like that. He just turned and walked away. Now, he didn't run. He didn't hurry. It was just a calm walk away. And the other thing I mentioned to you earlier that I found really odd about the whole thing, aside from seeing a Sasquatch, was that he did not look back at me. When he started walking away, I thought, well, he's going to stop, and look back. But that didn't happen. And some of the interesting things I noticed about him were, and I did some artwork, I should send it to you, Fred, was that our eyes were dark. I couldn't tell you if they were dark brown or black, but they were dark.
Right. And
just a ashen gray skin. I know it had hair everywhere, but like on the crease of the arms and on the knees, I noticed ashen gray skin. You could see through the hair. But one of the things that I focused in on this, but all the reports I hear, well, there's no hair around the eyes or nose, but this guy had like felt, just really fine hair on his nose, cheeks, and those areas that I think people report no hair.
Right.
It was fine, but it was there. I mean, he's close, I could see it. And I don't know why I focused in. I didn't really look at his body. I just kept watching his eyes and his expression. That's all I was worried about, was that there wasn't any aggression.
Yeah, no doubt. And what was the distance between when you stood up and you had that 4 to 5 second just stare down? What was your distance between you?
It was, I would say it was about 10 yards.
Yeah, that's...
Or less, yeah.
Yeah, that's
it
still
wasn't
real
far.
close.
We were right on top of each other, yeah.
Right. Okay, go ahead and continue.
Well, he was obviously young, and maybe that's a feature they lose when they get older. I don't know, but there was definitely hair all over his face, and like I said, across the cheeks and the nose, it was fine, but like I said, it looked like very short felt. And anyway, that was that. He walked away, and I thought it was interesting that whole year and a half that I kind of messed around with that. I never saw the track of a smaller Sasquatch. I never did see that. Of course, with that leaf litter, you probably wouldn't, but I would have thought that at some point I'd put that together, but I didn't. I didn't know it was there. All I thought was the one big one is all I knew about.
Right.
And to finish this up, I'll just go to the end when this whole thing. On that second year, I noticed they got a lot more vocal, and I soon realized there were 3 of them running around there instead of 2. But and the reason I say that is because I heard vocals that happened at the same time. But you'd have one up the hill, one down the hill, and one off to your right. And I got used to it. They had this coughing grunt. It wasn't. I didn't think it was aggressive. I think it was just letting me know they were there, Like I said, I never experienced any aggression to that point at all. And so I'll go to when I ended this whole thing. What happened was I went in there one evening, and it was I think it had been raining. It was kind of damp out, and I hear them calling more than ever. I mean, and they were whooping. It wasn't grunts. It was just full on whoops. And there was one up the hill, one down the hill, and like I said, one off to my right. And then all of a sudden, I got this. I never smelled this before, but on this day, I did smell it. This really strong, musty odor, and it it had a very musty urine type odor, and extremely strong. It was on par with like a skunk or a billy goat. You know how they stink, and
Right.
it was that loud, but a different odor. And I'm listening to them whooping back and forth. I'm smelling the smell, and I'm thinking they're all amped up about something. And I'm thinking, you know, I think maybe it's because I'm in here, you know. So this just made me feel awfully odd. So I thought best to get out of there. So I had been riding my bike up by that time, so I jumped on my bike and I headed out back to the main trail, and I made the turn and I went down there, I don't know, a couple hundred yards, and the smell had gone by this point. I didn't smell anything. And I run into like a wall of odor. So I know that they're right, you know, there's one right there. So I locked the bikes up on the bike, and I had my camcorder because I intended to get some footage, you know, that's what I was going to do.
Right.
And I start shooting with a camcorder upwind, and there's another clump of brush up there, like 20 feet away. I cannot see through it, but I know with every ounce of my being, there's a Sasquatch behind that clump of brush because I can smell it. And then as I'm looking up there, I realized, and kind of going through a mental map, that right behind me are tailing piles, and they're right up against the trail. And I thought, you know, this is a perfect pinch point. They knew where I was going. I ride it out in and out the same way every time. And I thought that you know, they patterned me. They probably watched me go by before, but they ran ahead, and I'm thinking that there's probably another one behind this tailing pile, and I didn't, you know, I felt kind of like right into their trap kind of thing.
Right.
And I got on the bike and I left the area. No other events, no problems. But I got home. I told my wife. I said, I'm done with this. I said that made me feel real uneasy, and I just am done with it. I mean, I think I'm playing with. Yeah, I don't know. You don't know what they're going to do. I mean, I don't.
Right.
I don't think they're going to sit around the campfire cooking, you know, marshmallows with them. That's for sure. And they certainly have the size to be very dangerous if they want to be. So
right. Now,
that's where it all kind of stopped in Alaska for me, Fred. After that happened, I backed off of it. Other than to occasionally look for a track or something, and I did notice, you know, through just the experience of going up there, seeing those log formations, stick formations that they had made, I noticed driving around Alaska and the rest of my hunting and fishing that I would occasionally see those in other areas, and I just make a mental note of it, you know. But other than that, I never experienced anything else after that happened in Alaska.
Right. I had a couple questions for you real quick there. So when you were kneeling down and, you know, that attention, you know, your focus was attention to your left when this thing was coming out from the trees, what was the feeling you had? Did the hair stand on arms or anything of that nature, or was it more of just a whoa kind of curiosity?
I'm glad you asked that, because I did leave something out. And when we first made eye contact, I literally felt like I had stuck my finger in 110.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I just felt like I just literally got shot. I mean, I don't know if it was adrenaline or what happened there, but I mean, I felt a jolt of electricity go through my body. Like I can't explain it. I mean, I imagine it was adrenaline, but you know, if you see something like that in real life, and then you know you hear about it, and then you see it, and especially at such close range, I felt like I stuck my finger in a light socket.
Right. I always described it as every fiber of your being wanting to flee, but it's stuck in your skin.
Yeah.
That's the best description I could ever come up with as far as that feeling goes. Also, when you were feeling like there was a coordinated effort, when you realized that you're going towards that pinch point, did you have any similar feelings then, or was it just hyper awareness?
All I felt then was, once I realized what potentially could be going down there, if there was one behind that tailing pile, was get out of here, you know.
Right. Man. Yeah, trust me,
Right.
you know, has with those experiences that you've dealt with over the years, do you feel like your intuition when it comes to these beings has been heightened due to those experiences? Like,
Absolutely.
okay,
Yeah.
all right,
No matter what, no matter what I do or where I go today, I'm constantly thinking about it, especially in the woods. I listened to a couple of your stories, especially that one on the Nuyahkuk up in Alaska, and I've actually spent time on Tikshik Lake or Nuyahkuk Lake, whatever you want to call it. The last time I was up there, I was there for a week, and we were caribou hunting, and I didn't have any experiences there at all other than with bears. But now that I hear your stories, I'm glad I didn't. Holy cow!
yeah, and you know that Nuyahkuk River, man, from where Tikshik ends and it goes the Nuyahkuk all the way down to the Nushagak, and just above there by Harris Creek on up to Lake Clark. You know, that whole area, if we were to draw it into a big triangle, that area has a very high concentration of indigenous encounters. You know, my local villagers, relatives of mine, like my cousin Nikolai, I've shared a couple of his experiences on the channel. Well, before I even brought the Hairy Man up to him, we were talking, and I had just started my channel. And before we hung up the phone, I was like, oh, hey, you got any good Hairy Man stories? And he goes, yeah, I do. You ever been to the Nuyahkuk River? And I laughed because he never knew of my experience on the Nuyahkuk. You know, this was a decade and, you know, changed later, like 16 years later. But unbeknownst to me, until he filled me in, there's been so many different people on that river drainage and the smaller tributaries around there that have had crazy experiences, and a large portion of them has to do with firearms having to be used to run these things off. Like, the level of aggression in that area seems to be so high, and you know, there's speculation that, you know, there's a lot more encounters around like gold mining, because that's my experience. We were up there to do some panning, you know, potentially stake a claim. And there's all these historical references around, you know, mining areas and places rich in quartz, gold, copper, you know, and it kind of makes you wonder why these areas with these concentrated minerals would have a drastically different experience. Like the Ape Canyon thing, you know, they were mining, and there's so many other ones that involve miners and these things coming in on them. It's kind of strange. Just speculation, of course, but just things that make you go, But hey, if you want to stay on the line here, buddy, I'm gonna wrap up the video portion, and then we'll finish chatting real quick here. But I want to thank John for sharing his experiences up here in Alaska, and we will catch you guys here on the next one. Thanks for joining us.